And we're live.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AIB's meeting of today. The day is October the 20th. We have a rather full agenda today. As I've noted from our agenda, we do not have any comments or public participation at this point in time. We will call the roll now and see who's here. So, Mr. Executive Director, why don't you take it over and call the roll for us at this point?
Yes, for the record, in addition to Chair Leggett, Vice Chair Kerwin and members Doss, Lynch, Stapleton, Manco, and Robinson are present.
Thank you. And again, thank for all of the staff members for your ongoing work and participation. We had a discussion, I think, a couple of weeks ago about the various things that people are doing, and it is quite a bit given all of the meetings, all the participation with different organizations around the state, and to get the amount of productivity that we get from our staff and for the board members. I really want to thank you again for your very, very hard work. As indicated earlier, we have a rather full agenda. We're going to talk just a little bit about the new superintendent and welcome her aboard as we make the transition, and hopefully will be a rather smooth transition in order to ensure the very important work that we have before us. But at this point in time, given the number of things we have on the agenda, let's look at them briefly, and we'll go basically to our executive director. No, I'm sorry, of the adoption of a minute summary from our last meeting. They've been made available to you, and I hope you've had a chance to look at them. If any comments, adjustments there too, please indicate it by raising your hands at this point in time. I don't see none. I'd like to entertain a motion at this point in time for the adoption of the summaries.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second that we adopt the last minute meeting summaries. Okay, we're now ready for the question. Any comments or questions therein? Nope, I see none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, they are so adopted. We now go directly to our executive director, and we will start with, at this point in time with you, Mr. Executive Director.
Thank you. Thank you. So first up is a staffing update. And first, what I would like to introduce, you all are familiar with Lisa Armstrong, who has been working with the AIB since, I believe, January on a part-time basis, and who we're very pleased to welcome as a permanent member of the staff as a full-time policy analyst. And Lisa is taking the policy analyst position associated primarily with Pillar 4 and equitable supports for students, as well as some work in Pillar 1, and right now in everything, as we're still staffing up. Lisa, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, ED Highs. I'm so happy to be here permanently and to work on Pillar 4 and to work on Pillar 1. Those are both passions of mine, and I am ever so grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you, and welcome aboard full time.
Thank you, Chair Ike.
Yeah.
Great. So in addition, we did at the last meeting, I provided an update about our recruitment. We did post a job notice to fill the other policy analyst positions, specifically related to pillars 1, 2, and 3, as well as a career and technical education specialist. And though we received a total of 132 applications for those positions, there's a process where the Department of Budget and Management reviews them and indicates who's qualified, who meets the minimum qualifications. 75 individuals met the minimum qualifications, and we are now in the process of doing the first round of interviews with the candidates. So we are very hopeful. We have a lot of great interest, and we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to fill the positions by the end of the calendar year. So we will keep plugging on that front. Are there any questions about staffing? Yes.
Have you, Rachel, what's the status of our search for a communications director?
We're going to be posting for that position later this month or early next month. So that'll be the next position that we post for, followed by the research and accountability director.
But we still continue to be served by the consulting group. Yes.
Yes, we have a 1-year contract with the communications consultant, so they're on board through this fiscal year at a minimum.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Okay. The next item I think is the an update on the technical assistance grant. And we have made a tremendous amount of progress on that front as well. And it really, I just want to really acknowledge that it's taken the hard work of pretty much everyone on staff, and especially Rachel Amstutz, who is managing the grant program. Rachel is not feeling well, so I'm going to provide an update, but she will chime in and potentially answer questions that you have. I think last month we shared that we had 84 applications to be strategic facilitators, and from those 48 went through a review process and a rubric, and 48 were selected, interviewed, and approved to be potential strategic facilitators. The LEAs and the CTE committee then had 2 weeks to review the applications and resumes of the potential strategic facilitators, interview them, ask them questions, and identify their top selections. From that, then what we call the pairing of the strategic facilitators was done. And in each case, the LEA and CTE committee were able to receive their first or second priority selection. Both lists are posted on the website of all 48 who were approved to be strategic facilitators, and then there's a list of the pairings by LEA and each who they've selected. They are in the process of finalizing the documentation. There's an MOU between the AIB and the LEAs and CTE committee, and then there's a grant agreement between the AIB and the strategic facilitators. So all those documents are in process to be executed. The grant period begins on Monday, October 16th, and runs through the fiscal year. We do have a kickoff meeting scheduled on Friday, October 20th. We've invited both the strategic facilitators and the LEAs and CTE committee to join the meeting to sort of ground everyone in what the goals of the grant are and the process. And then we're going to have some separate time just with the strategic facilitators. And then as part of the grant process moving forward, every month, AIB staff will be meeting with the strategic facilitators in a community of practice to share information sort of both directions. We can help provide information about Blueprint and respond to questions that they have, and they can share the work they're doing with their LEAs and the CTE committee and requests for technical assistance or other information. So we're very excited that we are about to launch this grant program. It's been a lot of work, but we're almost there.
Okay. So it officially starts Monday?
Officially starts Monday.
Wonderful.
Yes. Rachel A., do you want to add anything?
The only thing that I would add is that it's just been really exciting to watch as people are seeing the power of these strategic facilitators and how they're going to be able to assist them in moving forward, not only with the 2024 plan, but just with some of those sticking points and the tough things to figure out. So we're super excited to have identified such a powerful crew of people and to see the partnerships that were made. It's really working out well.
Thank you. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Rachel, is I think all the LEAs but 2 are involved in this. Is that right?
Correct.
The
Okay.
LEAs had it's voluntary, so they
Right.
had a choice whether they wished to participate or not, and 2 LEAs chose not to participate.
And they were
Frederick and Worcester.
Worcester. Okay.
Mr. Manco?
Do we get a sense of what the kind of spread of topics that the strategic facilitators were focused on, or were there certain things that were more, topics that were more prominent and selected by more LEAs as being areas where they needed additional technical assistance and support on?
That is a really great question. Broadly, they're all over the place. It's really what each individual district was focused on. There are many that are seeking some insights and some outside perspective on thinking through the career ladder. Also, teacher pipelines was a particular area of interest and partnerships with institutions of higher ed. Some are looking at early childhood and building those partnerships with the private-public relationships. A lot actually have also seen stakeholder engagement across all pillars as a theme that is pervasive throughout their work. So we're seeing a big emphasis also on the March 2024 plan, which some of our districts have asked for, and some of them know is coming because we're going to be including that in the work with our strategic facilitators, and we've been working with them already to help them start thinking about the big picture, that they were hired for their expertise across many areas, but that the biggest talent they bring to us is their ability to see big picture and to help facilitate that work with groups at all levels. So many of our districts do have 2, 3, 4 finer points they want to work on, but it's also all encompassed in the big picture of transformation and change management and stakeholder engagement. So those are some of the biggest ones that we saw repeatedly, coupled with the big picture vision.
You follow, Joe?
No, that was great and very thorough. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Member Doss.
Thank you. Just a follow-up from that question. Did the strategic facilitators actually request in the application, or I should say the applicants, did they request where they wanted to be, or what area, what locations that they could work in? And also, were there any LEAs, or were there any topics, I should say, that the LEAs wanted or needed but were not met?
Ooh, I like that last question. I'm going to start there. We offered the LEAs the opportunity to select from a pretty comprehensive list of topic areas, which included things like overarching themes like the stakeholder engagement or transformational change, and then also each of the pillars, and then even subsets within the pillars. We didn't find any LEA, or let me say, no LEA reached out to me and said, you don't have somebody who matches what we need. And many of the LEAs did reach out to me to kind of help narrow the field. You know, it was a big group for them to go through. So we did work with them to help narrow the field or to provide matches, and some even a little bit more than that. And we were able to find a nice handful of people for them to dig deeper with. And then the first question, we provided in the application the opportunity for the strategic facilitators to give us any other information or including geographic, but we didn't necessarily say like, tell us who you might want to work with or what areas, but we let them share just broad. Some of our applicants are out of state. And so we recognize that travel could have been an issue, or that being near an airport might have been important, or, you know, winter in the western part of Maryland can be tricky sometimes. But we let each of the districts work through that with the candidates that they interviewed. And we did find, as a broad summary, some of our candidates who were the furthest away, say California, they actually didn't get picked in this, and that may have been a factor given the time and the travel. But broadly, what we've heard from the process, every LEA was able to narrow down the pool to 5 to 8 candidates that they were interested in. And then they did interviews and had conversations with each of those. None of our strategic facilitators declined based on location. They all felt that it worked within their range.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
And these questions have just reminded me of a couple of other things I wanted to mention. As part of the initial grant agreement, the strategic facilitator and the LEA or CTE committee worked on an initial project plan that they have submitted. The final project plan is due November 15th. So essentially we needed something to provide sort of the an outline of the scope of work that they want to focus on. But then the grant period will start on Monday, and then they have a month to work on a final project plan and really have those conversations and discussions about what their big rocks are, both sort of in the more big strategic planning, as well as the individual pillars and topics that they want to focus on in their work with their strategic facilitator. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, as part of the kickoff meeting on Friday, and Rachel mentioned the 2024 plans. We've talked about that we've been working with MSDE staff and utilizing the survey that was conducted of the LEAs to see around the review process of their 2023 plans, both the review process and also the actual content of the template and the criteria for success. So we've been continuing to have those discussions and work collaboratively on a template, a revised template for the 2024 plans. We are not done with that work yet, but the LEAs have been asking for wanting to get started on their 2024 plans. And so as part of the initial work with their strategic facilitators, we have worked on a list of what we're calling blueprint reflection. I don't want to use the word questions, but I've blanked on. I think we just start calling them blueprint reflections that are sort of a series of sort of higher level topics and exercises that can help them do some of the strategic planning and thinking in advance of starting to work on their plans. So we're trying to give them some exercises to engage in with their strategic facilitator and with their bigger implementation plan teams in each LEA to help them be thinking more strategically and innovatively for what they do start to, when they do put it in writing in their plans, that they've kind of done a lot of the thinking in advance before the writing. So we're going to be sharing those with the LEAs on Friday.
Okay.
Any other questions? The next topic is the comprehensive plan update. And we are the final version of the comprehensive plan update is not ready in terms of the nice formatted, pretty document, but the actual substantive sections and the content is ready. We will be posting that to the website so that everyone can see the final language that was adopted and will be in the comprehensive plan update. And then we're working with our graphics team and editing team to pull it all together into a nice document that we will then post on the website and also translate into Spanish again, as we did last year. And then the final document, hard copies will be available upon request. We're trying to not print quite as many copies of it this year, but we will print as many as we need to.
Yeah, what is our time frame again?
Our time frame is before Thanksgiving to have it all finalized and posted electronically.
Okay. All right.
The other thing that has is now posted to the website are all of the LEA's final comprehensive implementation plans, as well as all the other backup documents and materials are all available, as well as the Spanish translations for those that we have gotten back. I think there are only a few that are done so far, but the translating company has all of them in hand now, I believe.
We have about 7 returned back to us, and we're right at that point where they're going to start rolling in pretty fast.
All right.
Okay. And then I think the last update is related to the other implementation plans that we received from state agencies. So AIB staff has been meeting with several of the agencies that have submitted their plans. We've had a number of meetings with the Maryland State Department of Education. We've met with the Higher Education Commission, and we've met with the Juvenile Services Education Program, and also with the CTE committee. And you'll see on the agenda today, we do have the CTE committee's plan recommended for approval today. We are in the process of requesting revisions to the plan from the State Department of Education. And then we will be holding a second meeting with the Higher Education Commission. They have a new acting secretary has come on board since the plan was submitted. So we are sort of working with them to talk through some of the questions that we have about their plan. And then the last agency is the Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. And we are going to be setting up a meeting with them soon to go over their plan with them. They have been extremely busy working on they put out the RFPs for their grant, their large $100 million in behavioral health grants that they're in the process of reviewing applicants and providers to receive those grants. And so we've sort of held off on that until they get through that process. So that's where we are on the other agency implementation plans.
Okay.
Any questions? Any other questions in general for me at the moment?
Okay, if not, then we'll go on to the agenda item number 3, which is the advisory committee appointments. And we'll turn that over to member Manco, Doss, and Robinson to fill us in on where we are with that. So, member Manco?
Sure, absolutely. So the nominations committee had recently met on a couple occasions to review 53 applications that we had for 5 vacancies on the advisory committees. And just to remind the public, we had vacancies for 1 member on advisory committees for pillars 2, 3, and 4. And there were also vacancies for student member positions on the advisory committees for pillars 1 and 2. So overall 5 vacancies. 3 for members, and then 2 for students. And as was the case previously with the nominating committee, we went through and considered several factors in making recommendations to the board, including a review of experiences and accolades, the geographical diversity of the various candidates, the racial and ethnic diversity of the candidates, and how all of those factors fit together to match with the individuals that were already serving within the 4 advisory committees, so that we had a diverse and comprehensive slate of recommendations to forward to the board. I want to thank so many of the members of the public who went through and were interested and invested, took the time to apply, especially for those 53 individuals who applied. I also want to thank, of course, the 5 members who are rolling off the advisory committee for all of their service. And then, of course, to the 19 advisory committee members who are continuing on to complete their respective 2- and 3-year terms. We've forwarded recommendations from the nomination committee to the full board for review. So that was in the memo that was submitted with the board packet. Overall, over the course of these 2 nominating sessions, we've gone through and have reviewed 213 total applicants, representing every corner of the state, and we've gone through and segmented them for each of the regions. So overall, over the course of the 2 nominating segments, we've had 45 applicants from the Baltimore area, 64 from Central Maryland, 18 from Eastern Maryland, 13 from Northern Maryland, 21 from Montgomery County, 26 from Prince George's County, 23 from Southern Maryland, and 3 from Western Maryland. All of those applicants, upon review, form the recommended candidates that we're forwarding to fill these 5 vacancies on the advisory committees.
Okay.
Any questions?
And to make sure of the final list in terms of the diversity again, I got what you meant in terms of the applicant seeking. So where do we stand once we've considered the additional applicants at this point?
Yeah, so let me see if I can pull up that information. So we if the 5 applicants that we've forwarded on behalf of the nominating committee are approved, we would end up overall the balance of the advisory committees. We would have 2 individuals from the Baltimore area, 8 from Central Maryland, 2 from Eastern Maryland, 2 from Northern Maryland, 1 from Montgomery County, 4 from Prince George's County, 2 from Southern Maryland, and 2 from Western Maryland. Overall, in terms of racial diversity, the let's see, with the new nominations, we will have let's see, we will have lost 2 Asian members and 2 Black members and 1 white advisory committee member, and then gained 1 Asian member, 2 Black advisory committee members, and 2 that identify as multiracial.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Very good job in diversity and the hard work. I again want to thank all of the advisory board members for their tremendous work and helping us get through some thorny issues over the last couple of years. Are there any question of board member Manko or any other of the members of the advisory committee working group? Okay, seeing none. Again, thank you, and thank for the work and leadership in getting this all together for us. Okay, we'll now go to agenda item 4, which is the Outcome Measures Working Group update. And we're going to turn that over to Board Member Laura Stapleton, and again, back to Board Member Menko.
Thank you. So the Outcomes Working Group has been, well, the work group itself has been on hiatus a little bit, but there's been a lot of work behind the scenes undertaken by Emma Pellerin and Rachel Heiss and others on the AIB staff, working with the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems staff through a contract to help identify potential sources of data and how long we might have baseline data for many of the measures. I'll give just a quick view of what's happening next, but I think I'm going to want Emma to chime in and share what she'd like to share. But upcoming, we had a meeting of the ex officio group, and the ex officio group are folks who are in the various agencies around the state to have some of the data that we'll be needing. We had a meeting of that group on Tuesday, and next week we're going to have a kickoff again of the Outcome Measures Work Group to continue on their very valuable work from the last year. But I'll let Emma chime in and explain kind of where we are in that work.
So we are, like Dr. Member Stapleton said, we are meeting for the first meeting of the fall next Thursday. And really this work involves looking at the work that we've done thus far. We have identified the measures that the AIB adopted, but operationalizing them is a next very big step in the process as well. So we are looking at where the data associated for each measure actually lives, where we're going to be getting that data. And in some cases, we have measures that are going to require new data collection activities and even the development of instruments to help collect that data. So this is going to be a very long process to be able to do that, because we'll have to be doing this work currently in some cases with identifying and getting the data sources for existing data, and then also looking at, okay, what needs to be done for the measures that do not have data associated with it. So we'll be trying to do that work, like I said, in parallel to move things forward as much as possible. But the work group, we are excited to have all of the members back. We have asked if any members are not continuing, and we haven't gotten any responses saying that work group members are not interested in continuing this work. So we're excited to have everyone back. We are also looking to expand to 1 to 2 student members, and we'll provide updates when we have finalized that. That's really the next part of what the work group is doing, is looking at the data for each of these measures and what needs to be done to actually operationalize them so that targets can be set for the measures that we want to set targets for and publicly track and monitor. The work group report, as you recall, we're going to be tracking data in some cases and not necessarily setting targets for it right now. But we are focusing on those measures for which we want to set targets for right away, and really looking at prioritizing those measures as much as possible and thinking about what measures we need to be setting targets for first. So that will also be part of the work of looking at what needs to happen, what are our leading indicators of progress, and what we need to be setting targets for initially. So we'll be bringing those updates to the work group as well.
Could I have an indication of, again, maybe Ed said it, but I wasn't quite sure I heard it clearly, about the time frame for the production of work and when we'll get some of those measures?
So we have, so in terms of the targets and when the targets will be set, we're working as quickly as possible. Executive Director Heiss, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, we're working as quickly as possible to set the targets. So we are working on a target setting process with MLDSC staff who, as you know, we have an MOU with them and have been working with them to identify what this process and framework will be for actually setting the targets, and are seeking feedback and input about what considerations should be made with that. And we hope to have that framework more or less finalized. Of course, the process could change, but hope to have that finalized next month. And then after that, it's as we said, we're looking to get the data as quickly as possible. So some of the measures, it's going to be partly informed by how quickly we can get the data that we need to set those targets.
Are you actually talking about the actual targets of when you would have a decision on all of it? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I know it may be a different time for the actual targets when that information is in, but there's a separate question of when will we have a decision about when we'll make the decision for the target. Because once you make that, you have to wait until the actual results and do the comparative analysis at that point, I assume.
So, Mr. Chair, in terms of setting the targets, the work group will be making recommendations to the board, and then the board would adopt the targets. And then, to your point, once the targets are set, there will still be the process of analyzing the actual results and comparing them to the targets.
Yeah, I understand the second part of it. I was trying to get the first question. Yes.
So I think, unfortunately, we can't give you a specific date right now because there is a lot of data that needs to be identified and either compiled, or in many cases, the data doesn't exist yet. At least it's not collected at the state level. And so there will need to be a data collection process. So, and then at the same time, Murphy's Law, I think, is that the measures where the data is readily accessible aren't necessarily the high priority measures that we would want to have targets for. So all of these considerations are going to be part of what the outcome measures work group talks about, and that we bring back to the full board to consider. Member Stapleton or Manco, anything to add?
I think that's right now. I was going to offer Member Manco now.
This is extremely hard work, and I know that, speaking for Member Stapleton, Manco, and Emma, we all are pushing really hard to get this work done as quickly as we can, but we also need to make sure it's accurate and reasonable, and balancing that is quite a challenge. And our partners at the MLDS, are saying, "Oh, we're moving very fast. This is very fast," and we're like, "Well, it doesn't feel fast enough." But we can only do what we can do, and what we can do with the data that we have.
And Rachel, actually, I think that's a great segue into our next portion here, is because we don't want to choose a measure that is going to potentially be harmful in the future, and be very thoughtful about it. So let me move us, if it's okay, to a presentation. We have
that is fine. Can I just
sure.
Go ahead and do that? I just want to make the point that we do need to go back because we need a motion for the advisory committee recommendation. So we do need to go back and do that, but we can do that after Dr. Tolson and Dr. McClendon make their presentation.
Okay, we'll do that. So I am very pleased to welcome today two, I'll call them colleagues. Dr. Ivory Tolson is the National Director of Education, Innovation, and Research for the NAACP and Professor of Counseling Psychology at Howard University. And he had served in a consultant capacity for the Kirwan Commission back in the day. And he's joined by a colleague, Natasha McClendon, and she's a senior research associate at Georgia State University. And they were asked by the AIB to serve in the role of equity consultants, specifically for the outcome measures. And although many of our conversations in the work group identified potential inequities in some of the measures that we were considering, we've asked them to review the sort of final list that was approved in July. And highlight any measures that may result in or fail to recognize inequities that are across the educational system. So I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to present.
Laura,
Mhm.
Member Stapleton, excuse me. If I
Yes.
could say a very quick word,
Please.
I just want to say how blessed and fortunate we were to find Dr. Tolson when the commission was doing its work. He has such stellar credentials and such credibility, and we brought him on, and he and his team read the entire commission report, which was how many pages, Rachel? Several hundred, and went through it very carefully to look at any issues where we could where equity issues could be coming into our recommendations, and he made a couple of dozen recommendations for changes, which we adopted in every case. And we were just so fortunate to have him, and I am thrilled that he's come back to help us yet again with the with these metrics for the AIB. So, Dr. Tolson, it's wonderful to see your face now virtually, but it's great that you're back helping us out.
Yeah, thank you so much, and you did give me some goosebumps. So I appreciate your kind words, and I certainly appreciate you, Dr. Kerwin, for your vision for all of this, and for really taking the leadership in this movement that I think could serve as a model for other states. That's why I really take the work seriously. I've had a very good experiences with the team. With Rachel as executive director and Emma in terms of providing such detailed information and keeping us on task, and with Laura and Joseph co-chairing the group and having some very good conversations. So I'm going to give a high level overview, and thank you also for introducing Dr. McClendon, who worked with me very closely. Not only on the report, but she also participated in all of the meetings so that I could have that second set of eyes and we could really talk through a lot of these issues together. So I'm going to give a high level review of a 28-page report that's in the final stages of development right now. We did prepare some slides with the assistance of Emma, so I'm going to share the slides, but I'm going to try not to present the slides per se. I don't want to take away from the tone of this meeting, but the slides will just kind of give us some points here and there and jog my memory to different things. But overall, when we approached this, there was a draft of outcome measures that were proposed to look at all of these pillars, and we did an initial review of the outcome measures before we got started, gave some initial feedback, and then we participated in all of the meetings as they refine the outcome measures. So in this report, it does reflect not only our review of the final outcome measurements list, but it also reflects the input that we all had and some of the agreements that we had as we were going to these meetings. These were the public meetings, the working group meetings, all of those different meetings that we had. In terms of
Wilson, could I ask you to switch over to slideshow mode?
Oh, okay.
So it's bigger for my small or my eyes that
Sure.
can't see small things. Thanks.
Okay, is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I do realize this is wordy. All right, so in terms of technical framing, our theoretical framing, very similar to the approach that we took when we worked with the original Kerwin Commission, looking at ways of using data for equity, using some of the concepts I advanced in my book, No BS, in terms of looking at comprehensive good data, looking at a thoughtful analysis that includes within group analysis and thoughtful comparisons and a compassionate understanding of the data.
Dr. Tolson, just for those who may not know what BS stands for in this context, would you mind sharing?
Oh, did I say, I didn't say what it stood for?
No.
Bad stats. BS for bad stats. Sorry. Thanks for stopping me. Yeah, so I wrote a book called No BS, and BS is for bad stats. And the book looks at how data could be used and misused, especially in the educational setting. So in terms of the report format, we looked at all of the different pillars. We evaluated the pillars, are the outcomes that were proposed, outcome measures that were proposed for either their potential to advance equity or some cautionary notes about some of the measures that we thought had a greater potential to perhaps be used or work against our aims. So I'll talk about some of the potential and some of the risk as we saw in the report. And I've already talked about how the final list of report, our measures that we evaluated are measures that we agreed with through the process, and it reflects the conversations that we've had throughout the process. So in terms of pillar one, we believe that, and this is a pillar that deals with early childhood education. And so we believe that is very important. The aims of this pillar is very important. Some of the things that we noted was that we needed to really understand that access to pre-K, high quality pre-K education is different across circumstances. And we wanted to make sure that the measures captured that. We had a lot of concerns, and probably some of our most robust debates were around the kindergarten readiness assessment. And this is an assessment that I talked about in the initial review of the blueprint report. And there was, I'm not sure that we came to a total agreement on the utility of kindergarten readiness, but I think we did agree on certain aspects of the implementation. One of it is making sure that we disconnect kindergarten readiness assessment from the larger theoretical construct of kindergarten readiness. And this is consistent with classical test theory. That means that even though it's called kindergarten readiness assessment, it is a measure, and the measure needs to be looked at apart from the larger notion of whether or not this child is ready for kindergarten and whether this child is not. So in other words, plain speak, you can score low on the kindergarten readiness assessment and still be ready for kindergarten based on other factors. And we need to make sure that the general public knows that, because the way that this particular assessment is framed and the historical use of this assessment, the ways that the data is portrayed, it can lead to the conclusion that certain children are not ready for kindergarten of certain demographics. And it may not necessarily have to do with whether or not they're actually ready. It could be some biases in the assessment. The kindergarten readiness assessment routinely shows Asian students being less ready for kindergarten than white students, for instance. But yet, when we get into higher grades, we see that Asian students outperform white students. So that's one obvious cultural bias that it has, but there's others that seem to be embedded within the assessment. Another suggestion that we have is when we talk about training people to use a kindergarten readiness assessment or child care providers, we want to make sure that the trainings do deal with rater bias and not just training the technical aspects of the assessment. We also have recommendations with the proper use of Maryland Excels. And this is based on some literature that we looked at, not necessarily my own experience with Maryland Excels, because I have very little, but there is some publications out there that show that aspects of Maryland Excels may be vulnerable to not being as culturally and linguistically responsive as it could be. We've also recommended that that we look at how the ECE programs in the state of Maryland are collaborating with other programs, such as Head Start and public schools, to make sure that there's a smooth transition and alignment for families. So that's Pillar 1. And I'm not sure how you all want me to structure the presentation. Do you want me to like pause between pillars or just flow to the end?
I think, why don't you flow to the end, because
Okay.
I want to make sure we get through it. And some people can ask a lot of questions or not, so.
Okay. And Dr. McClendon, did I miss anything that we may have talked about in Pillar 1?
No, you're good.
Okay, and I'll check in with you after each pillar to make sure. All right, so Pillar 2, very important pillar that looks at the quality of the teachers that we have and the diversity of teachers. Through our participation in the work groups, we had some very robust conversations about how do we understand quality teaching, our teachers, how do we make sure that we tap into the diverse talent that's out there and make sure that students in schools that need them most have the types of teachers that's going to make a difference in their lives. We talked about the role of HBCUs and minority serving institutions, which was looking at these programs and their contribution is something that was added through the conversations that we had. So we believe that there was a lot of good improvement and refinement of the outcome measures associated with this pillar. Some of the recommendations that we had related to this, we thought that it would be important for us to look at the number and hours of Maryland educators participating in professional development that's particularly specifically geared towards culturally responsive teaching. We are tracking their professional development, but we don't have a provision in there that looks at their professional development specifically on looking at how to teach across cultures. And we think that that's very important in Maryland because there is a demographic mismatch between the teacher workforce in Maryland and the student population. We also want to see, what's the impact of these professional development programs. Another recommendation that I have in here is to look at teachers using technology to advance equity. We understand that schools are changing drastically, and many of the ways in which we understand what makes a teacher a good teacher are based on an environment and based on teaching standards and a society that looks very different than society looks today. And we know that as teachers use technology more, it gives them the opportunity, or it gives us the opportunity to create new priorities around what makes a teacher a good teacher. There's something called cognitive augmentation, which is a notion that if you use technology effectively, then some of the classic indicators of intellectual ability, like memory, becomes less important. And so that allows us to reprioritize other aspects of what makes a teacher a good teacher, like some of those humanistic aspects, whether or not they have compassion, whether or not they know how to engage students, whether or not they have empathy and understand how to use more creative ways of delivering information. And so we think that having a metric that looked at how teachers are using technology would be something that could bring the state of Maryland's conceptualization of teaching to more modern times, something that I don't see a lot of in other states. And I have a lot of details about that in the report. We also caution about using the National Board Certification System as a proxy for how we view a great teacher from a good teacher. A lot of the ways in which you gain National Board Certification, it doesn't necessarily seem to be connected squarely to what it would take for a teacher to teach in an environment that has fewer resources or that is more culturally diverse, economically diverse. So I want to make sure that we're acknowledging that some of the limitations of National Board certification of teachers and principals. Some of the studies and some of these studies are dated, but there are studies that show that board certified teachers tend to be more often teachers who are not of color. They also tend to be more women teachers and also more teachers who are teaching in STEM fields. So if there's lack of diversity among National Board Certified teachers, but we're saying that we want more of them in diverse settings, then it can compete against our objective of creating a more diverse teacher workforce. And so that gets into the final recommendation in terms of considering alternative or complementary indicators of teacher quality. And that's something that the outcome measurements work group will have to think a little bit more deeply about. If we're not using board certification, what are some of these other things that may help us to understand some aspects of teaching that may be even more important for some of the communities that need them most? Anything that I missed, Dr. McClendon or Pellet too?
No, I think I would just say that in summation, the cultural responsiveness part is kind of integrated into each of these recommendations and how that might have impact in how the teachers approach things like assessment, pedagogy, curricular implications for the students if we're not able to necessarily get diverse teachers into the classrooms at the rates at which we would like, but how do we then train teachers who are there if 85% of the teachers are like a homogenous group? Then how do we start to think about how to bridge those gaps in cultural bias and responsiveness?
Okay, so in terms of pillar 3, and this is our pillar that helped us to look at how we're preparing our students for college and careers. This is one where we really looked at how we're measuring student success, and it brought up a lot of some of the longstanding issues and debates that we've had in terms of the role of testing in understanding how a student is doing. So we had some very good conversations in that and came to a lot of important conclusions. I think that there was a lot of evolution from the initial draft of outcome measures to the final outcome measures that included various things like disaggregating data a lot more, allowing for more within group analysis so that we're not just doing blanket comparisons of different races, but actually looking within to understand those bright spots and how we expand up on success. In terms of some of the considerations, since we had the most robust conversation about testing, there is some guidance that we provided in the report to understand how to use testing in a way that isn't hurting the students, but a way to help all of our students to achieve. So some of the things that we talk about in the report is the importance of data democratization. And that's looking at data as not the property of people who are making high-level decisions, but looking at data in terms of how important is it for everyone. And this isn't just about sharing data. It's not about taking the same data that we've already been collecting and just making sure that it's publicly accessible, because sometimes that actually makes things worse. It's about looking at the data that you have generated and thinking what would be useful for people to understand. The children that's represented in this data, what would be useful for their parents to know, and thinking carefully about how they might interpret the data, whether the data will make them feel embarrassed about their children, or whether it's data that will help them to have pride in what their children are doing, but understand some areas of growth that their children need to accomplish. That also gets into the area of data literacy, because in order for us to present data in the best way, we have to be very literate on how to use the data. That means that we need to make sure that we're not taking these numbers and applying it to different situations without understanding the level of confidence that we should reasonably have in certain numbers, and how different error indicators, error in terms of the testing conditions, the motivation, the temperature in the class, the resources, all of these things can create an effect on a test score that is not associated with the actual score itself, or the potential of that student. So it makes the confidence interval a lot wider, and it means that we should look at the data with more caution in some environments than in others. So these are things that everyone who is handling the data needs to understand about the data, so that they're not misusing the data. Then I talked about the no bad stats. So that just gets into this issue that we've had in education, where we'll take these blanket statements. We'll say a percentage of children in a certain area that may be dropping out, or that may be truant, or different things like that, and leave it out there with no context. A lot of times it's used more to demonize and to chastise, and not really use as high impact data, which gets to the last thing. High impact data is really being thoughtful about what data is useful and what it's being used for. If we put data out there and don't really have the conversation about how are we going to use it to better the lives of these students, what is its impact on the environment? Is it an impact that's going to lift them up, or is it an impact that's going to tear them down? So these are things that we talk about in the report. Then other recommendations, and just kind of go through these really quickly, because they really point to a lot of things I've already said. But we talk about looking at career counseling a little bit more deeply, because we think that that's really speaks to what this pillar is about. The outcome measures look at high quality instructional materials, but we really have to understand what high quality instructional materials are in the context of this very diverse student body that we have, the most diverse student body in history, and make sure that culturally responsive curriculum is included in our definition of high quality instructional material. We also talked about multiple measures, and not just looking at testing and assessment data, but really looking through at various indicators. We talk a lot about Maryland's college and career readiness standards, but acknowledging that there has been an empirical study done by the state of Maryland, and this is a study that we're going to look more closely at. but on the surface, it seems to address some of the issues in terms of using CCR standards with a diverse population. So that's pillar 3. Quick pause. Okay. So pillar 4, and this is the last one that we really evaluated. And this is the pillar that dealt the most directly with some of these issues of equity. It's a pillar that talked about the need for every student to feel welcome in the environment. So there was a lot more potential than risk and considerations in this pillar. Some of the things that we did look at was some of the outcome measures around behavioral health support. We recommended that we go further than just looking at who has the support, but looking at the quality, accessibility, and the effectiveness of those supports, knowing that some of these supports have uneven outcomes based on some socio-demographic characteristics. And then also the report talks about chronic absenteeism, but doesn't really seem to get much into root cause analysis of that. Sometimes it's not students just being chronically absent, it's them being pushed out. And so, if we have students who are chronically absent after a period of being suspended for 10 days, that's something that we have to look at. And we also have to look at a lot of other things in terms of some of the social emotional health aspects of absenteeism. So those are the recommendations we had for pillar 4. Pause here. Okay. So that's a broad overview, and I could keep sharing my screen for a little while. If someone wanted me to go back to a slide, I could stop sharing it if we're just going to open it to a broader discussion.
Okay, I'm not sure. Are there questions, Rachel? I had one or two, but entertain others at this point in time. And thanks to Dr. Tolson for your presentation. We're very comprehensive here.
I don't see any hands up right now.
I think member Kerwin and vice chair.
Sorry, I was looking for the virtual hand.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Tolson. That was very helpful and enlightening, and we appreciate the careful work that you and Dr. McClendon have done. I just wanted to, you said at the very outset that, correct me if I misstate this, that you thought the measures were appropriate. Some clearly advance equity, others, unless there's some, would need some safeguards built in to ensure they didn't have a negative, but that the measure was okay provided there were certain understandings and safeguards built in. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm assuming, I'm hoping that you will help us ensure that those safeguards are in place as this work goes on. My one other question, I'm very interested in the National Board certification, and you mentioned that there were a number of studies that sort of raised some questions about the equity and the appropriateness. And I think you used the word, although they are somewhat dated. And there is a new executive director of the National Board certification group who we've had some interaction with. And she appears to be very sensitive to those issues. And to the best of my knowledge, is making some revisions in the process. I didn't know whether there's no reason you would have, but I just didn't know whether you were aware of any of any of those kinds of changes? And if you are, if you had any thoughts about them.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that. And I did, do a little bit of investigating and preparing the report. And I noticed that there's an equity commission or an equity committee for the National Board Certification. So I'm sure that they have discussed some of the longstanding concerns. And so I would be interested to know, what changes specifically they're making. On the most fundamental level, what I was looking at is a recommendation that we have more board certified teachers in higher disadvantaged neighborhoods or schools that have disadvantages. So what I would be interested in seeing is what is a pathway to becoming National Board Certified, and whether or not that pathway would give us the reasonable expectation that they would be better suited in this environment. There's probably a lot of evidence that when we look at teachers, when we look at the traditional attributes of a teacher that makes teachers strong, traditionally or historically, the National Board Certification process helps us to identify those with the strongest traditional attributes. But in this disadvantaged neighborhood, perhaps it's a student who actually grew up in that neighborhood, and became a teacher, and may not be board certified, but may be better suited for that school because of that connection. So that's what we would need to know. We need to understand, what do disadvantaged students need? What do they need in that environment? When I think about the things that they're missing, National Board Certified teachers, that don't pop up to the top of the list for me. So, just want to take a closer look at that.
Sure. So, Rachel, maybe it would be possible to get Dr. Tolson connected to the executive director, just so we'd have a sense that
awareness
changes they're making would help to address some of these issues.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. We have been having some discussions with Peggy Brookins and her staff. And the name of the person leading the equity initiative is escaping me, but staff has met. We've had a meeting with her, but we are happy to connect, and also perhaps we might want to invite them to speak either to the AIB or to the outcome measures work group.
Thank you.
One more thing, just following up on Dr. Tolson's responses, it might be important to consider the value proposition for less represented teachers. So the Black teachers, as an example, don't feel like it's worth it to them to be board certified. Then considering if that's something that you want to put as a criteria measure that would then bar them from being able to serve in those communities as well.
I have a question going to Pillar 3. The most significant argument that I've constantly run into on the college and career readiness is the following question, proposed in a number of ways: that a disproportionate number of minority students, brown and Black, would be tracked essentially into non-college degree programs. And it has been something that has been out there for a long period of time. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the work of the current commission tried to anticipate this by elevating what is career readiness to an international standard, to provide the kind of resources and support that will give people a real feeling and a knowledge that this is something that is highly professional and capable of having a lifelong impact, both in terms of a profession, knowledge, experience, and what have you. Nonetheless, in terms of equity, that question will be with us for a period of time. It's no easy route to just pass that over. I think in time we may be able to correct that impression, but did you give any thought to that overall proposition? Mm-hmm. Not that you don't have these resources in other areas to help strengthen that, but the attitude of a parent, and my child is not going to college, and if I look at all the kids who are going into these other careers, it will probably end up being based on following the traditional outcomes, a more brown and Black number of kids there that goes against what the commission was trying to prove in the first place.
Yeah, we did have a lot of robust conversations about that. And I think we agreed that tracking is wrong. And that the nature of development is such that you can't measure somebody. There's limits to these assessments that we have in place here, and you can't measure them and be able to tell at really any point during their schooling whether or not they're going to go to college or go into a trade just based on a test. And so that's a mentality that we think is harmful. And there's language in the recommendations, and I think in the measurements framework that talks about the use of holistic measures and also increasing opportunities. I think if implemented appropriately, the apprenticeship programs and the enhancing career counseling, enhancing their exposure to various opportunities. Those are really going to be the things that can increase the chances that we have more diversity in our colleges in the future. But you're correct in that these are longstanding issues, and these are conversations that we're going to have to continue to have. But we haven't had these conversations with the public in a way that I think that we need to. And so, part of these recommendations is about pulling in more diverse perspectives and community stakeholders and really understand how different communities understand the opportunities and the pathways that they have to go into college or the workforce.
Okay, thank you.
There were a couple of other hands up. I just wanted to check.
Okay.
Member Doss and Member Robinson, did you still have a question?
Yes, thank you. Chairman Leggett asked my question very eloquently, so it was addressed.
And I'll go. I do still have a question. So this is along the lines of national board certification and that conversation earlier. Is the equity issue in it sounded like you were saying that disadvantaged students might need certain types of characteristics in their teachers, right? Mm-hmm. So is the equity issue that teachers of color aren't going into that track, like aren't pursuing it at as high of a rate, or is it strictly that we prioritize other attributes in teachers who work in such schools?
It could be both. Now, I'm not sure what the demographics of national board certified teachers are now, but at least 10 years ago, it was majority white. So if we just looked at demographics, if we're saying that a segment of the teacher workforce that's more white than the general population of teachers need to be more into disadvantaged communities, that's what the report is saying, then just the demographics of that is a little concerning, even if we just looked at that. But we also have to look at what are they measuring in terms of board certification. So, I went to a what would be considered a disadvantaged high school. I went to a public school that has a 1 out of 10 on great schools. They eliminated a lot of the classes like physics and calculus and things like that. And so if I think about the teachers in that school that really made a difference, teachers who were inspiring students to do things like, join the newspaper staff, which is something that a teacher inspired me to do that changed my life. When I just think about what the teachers were doing in order to give students a shot, I don't know whether or not it correlates with national board certification. So that's the thing. What makes us believe that national board certified teachers are better equipped to teach in disadvantaged schools than another type of teacher? And I'm not saying that they're not, I just don't know that we've put as much thought into it as we should.
Okay, so so that you're not saying that they're not more capable in that setting. You're saying that we're not sure if they are.
Yeah, I mean, we have that recommendation on the book.
Okay.
So why do we have the recommendation? The recommendation now is for more national board certified teachers to teach in disadvantaged areas. The question is why? We always have to ask the question why.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just, Dr. Kerwin may want to add something too, but just for context, the commission recommended using national board certification as, let's call it a proxy for great teachers, for teachers who are well prepared to teach, not any particular type of student, but overall. And then the recommendation, and then there are salary incentives to encourage all teachers to want to pursue national board certification, and an additional $7,000 increase because we want great teachers. Again, national board as a proxy for that. We want great teachers to be in our schools that are low performing and that have the greatest needs. So it wasn't necessarily, I don't think, at least, and Dr. Kerwin, again, please, I don't want to speak for you, but the recommendation wasn't based on the lens that what Dr. Toldson just articulated. Interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I got it. I could see that it wasn't the board certification in and of itself. It was its proxy to being a great teacher. But I still, ask the question, what makes a teacher great? And is a great teacher here also a great teacher there? Like we have like Teach for America models that believe that the status of your school makes the teacher greater. And so, TFA traditionally, they would prefer a student who came from Stanford over a student that came from Bowie State. But in certain contexts, a student from Bowie State might be better. So it's, it's what makes a teacher great. That's what we, have to get into. And then it also gets into what I talked about earlier in terms of with society becoming more diverse, more technical, should we be reprioritizing our traditional view about what makes a teacher great? Because historically, great teachers, as measured by a lot of the ways in which we certify teachers, come from teachers performing more like computers. So they're able to retain more information, they're able to deliver more information. But in terms of the things, the humanistic skills, a lot of times that's not captured in our current certification process. So in terms of the board certification process, does it capture humanistic types of skills that may be more important in tougher learning environments? That's what we have to, that's the question that we have to ask.
Well, I think that's such an excellent point. And to me, the not, I don't know, the fix or the issue is, does being a great teacher by national board standards mean that you can teach children who are come from disadvantaged backgrounds?
Yeah.
I mean, if that was built into national board certification,
absolutely,
that would be a way in which this issue, I think, could be resolved.
Yeah.
And
I look forward. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, but I do look forward to hearing more about that process and hearing from the new commission, because I know that many organizations are grappling with these issues, and it's more than who can teach in disadvantaged communities and who doesn't, and who can't, which is is a very important question, but it speaks to the larger issue of should standards change as times change?
Yes.
And what it took to be a great teacher in 2005, is that the same thing that it takes to be a great teacher in 2025?
Yeah, that's such a good point.
But step back for just one moment and step away from National Board Certified and just ask yourself the question: what makes a traditional any teacher an effective teacher?
Mm-hmm.
What is the measurement of how we determine that?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure you have empirical data that would suggest that. Some people say, based on your student outcome, how well they perform. Well, if I performed in a fairly advanced school, my students are most likely to come out better to start with. Some people say the length of time and service in which the teacher has worked. People in higher education claim that based on publication, student reviews, an awful lot of other things. So I'm not sure, once we raise that question, it opens up sort of a can of worms that we have not been able to provide the empirical data to determine the effectiveness of any teacher out of those parameters that I've just described.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And even though we don't have the empirical data, we have mountains of anecdotal data. And I'm sure if we asked everyone on this call, name the teachers that made a big difference in your life, that made you who you are right now, and what did that teacher do? We can come up with a whole list of things. And then we can compare that list to national board certification standards and see how similar that is to what they do. I know that if we compare that list to certification standards, for just regular state certification standards, a lot of times there's a bit of a mismatch.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other question, Rachel?
Member Stapleton.
Yeah. My original comment I'll share in a moment, but I just wanted to respond to the chair. I think a lot of current teacher evaluation systems do not use a sort of status measure of how good are your students in your particular class at performing on some assessment, but actually take information about where what the students could do before that. So I just wanted to put out on the record that there's much more complex teacher evaluation systems out there. But my hand originally went up about 5 minutes ago because I just wanted to let everyone know who's watching and everybody in the room here that this is the sort of conversation that we've had for the last 10 months, which is why this is a really hard job, because the legislation says that we need to increase the number of nationally board certified teachers, and it's taking that prior information about the relationship between being board certified and outcomes for students and codifying that this is what we need to do. So a natural outcome measure would be, well, have we increased the number of nationally board certified teachers? Well, I think it's really important that we listen to our equity consultant suggestions saying, well, we need some guardrails here. And just because we're increasing the number of certified teachers, that may not be actually a good goal for certain students. So the outcomes work group has a difficult problem. We're trying to come up with outcomes to reflect what's required in the legislation, but create measures that will alert us to potential problems with the logic of the legislation. So it's a really complicated task.
Member Robinson, did you still have another question?
No, not another question. I think a lot of my thoughts have kind of been summarized. I'm thinking through this as through the lens of being a teacher who's national board certified, who works in a I guess what people would deem as a disadvantaged school, who has announcements. Sorry.
You're bringing the school flavor to our meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. So I definitely understand. I guess I was kind of thinking, in schools that have the most need, often I feel like I do think there's a need for highly qualified, highly trained teachers. I don't think that means that we don't need to have other humanistic characteristics as you've identified. It might be a both and sort of situation. And I guess that's kind of the lens I was looking through. Like, I don't think that, certain schools shouldn's a strong word, but I don't think that we're saying that they have a less priority or of a need for certain teachers. I think we either need to address the pipeline to national board certification so that there are more teachers who represent or who, look like the students who they serve, or we need to make sure that we're including certain other characteristics in how we choose to staff these schools. If it's a disadvantaged school, they need to. Well, in the disadvantaged school, I guess I was just thinking so yes, you still need the highly qualified teachers, but then you also need to be sure that you're staffing your schools with people who have certain other characteristics as well. So I'm just going for a both and approach. I do see the value in both attributes.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only question. Going back to the earlier comment, how do we measure that? Because I think you're right that we need both. Those who are national board certified and those who find other ways that are fairly effective in teaching. But we need to be able to assess that and make a determination as to whether or not that is producing the kinds of results that we think we should have. But I think certainly we need both. And a person like you having both, I think, is a prime example of that. I thought when you started to argue, I thought you were going to say, well, this conversation we're having today should not mean that you take away that extra stipend that you get. But I guess you weren't making that argument. Any further questions, Rachel?
I don't see any other hands up. Any other questions?
Okay, Dr. Towson, thank you so very much for a very enlightening session today. And I want to thank the committee again. And as indicated a little bit earlier, this is very, very challenging and tough, but we have to come up with some guardrails, parameters, I think, in the foreseeable future, because the challenge that we face is that if we don't establish those parameters, those measures, others will start to define them for us. And that's the challenge that we would have, that we end up with a myriad of 24 different assessments and beliefs about assessments, and those are articulated and communicated around the state in a way that we lose control of that. So we have to be out front and put a mark in the ground to say, this is how we're going to make our determination of what we believe are the appropriate outcomes. So there is a challenge for us of having to do that within a reasonable period of time.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can go back to the advisory committee recommendations and there
Hold on.
is a vote.
Yeah. We have to take,
There is a motion. If you update your board agenda, there's now a motion with the list of the 5 recommended members. And Mr. Manko, did you want to make that motion?
Sure. I would like to make a motion to appoint the following individuals to the following AIB advisory committees. So for Pillar 1, the nominating committee would like to recommend Sakshi Tirodkar from Howard County to a 1-year term. For Pillar 2, the student member we would like to recommend is Stephanie Masieko from Prince George's County for a 1-year term. For Pillar 2, we would like to nominate Devorah Danielson from Anne Arundel County to a 2-year term. For Pillar 3, we would like to nominate Nona Carroll from Howard County to a 2-year term. And finally, for Pillar 4, we would like to nominate Hope McGuire from Montgomery County to a 2-year term.
thank you. There's a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded that the 5 individuals so named for the 5 different pillars we have assessed will be approved for the terms mentioned for the 1- and 2-year terms. Any questions or discussion about the motion presented by the regarding the advisory committee? Okay, seeing or hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. They're so approved. Thank you. And thanks again to the committee.
Thank you.
Okay,
The
let's,
next item on the agenda,
yes.
the Career and Technical Education Committee, implementation plan approval. And I would like to ask Emma Pellerin, the implementation plan director, to give you some background and describe the process and the recommendations.
Yes, thank you. So we're excited to share our recommendation for approval of the CTE committee's initial blueprint implementation plan. Similar to the LEA plans, there was a review process of the plan conducted by AIB staff and consultants. And so we have a similar feedback form that we have provided with today's materials that include areas of strength and opportunity and areas for growth and continuous improvement. But before we get to those areas, I'd just like to quickly share, what that process looked like in terms of the review. We are evaluating all state plans around the same criteria of the extent to which they are comprehensive, meaning that they've included all required elements, baseline data, and how each task and subtask will be implemented that are in the comprehensive plan and assigned to that particular state agency to be implemented. We also evaluate the extent to which each plan is ambitious by identifying opportunities for growth and demonstrating the ability to achieve blueprint goals and integrating innovative strategy into their blueprint plans. The extent to which they are strategic and identify timelines that they need to that they are going to be implementing these activities within, the identification of specific implementation considerations and challenges to implementation and how they will be overcome. And of course, the extent to which they are equitable, and describe how equity and cultural responsiveness are embedded through the plan to enable all students to be successful and ensure they get the supports that they need to be successful. We also met with CTE committee staff and are doing so with other agencies to debrief their plan after the submission. And we did request a written response to their plan with a follow-up question, which is also included in the feedback. So we wanted some additional information on how the CT committee is approaching its role in leading the development of a rigorous and statewide CTE system, and how it envisions leading state agencies and partners in developing the CTE system. So we really provided a lot of feedback in the feedback form as well, and just asked for this more detail about how they envision their role in this work. Just considering that, we understand the staffing needs and change in leadership and staffing constraints that the CT committee has faced. So we wanted to ensure that that was acknowledged as well. So the CT committee did submit a written response to our request for additional information, and we've reviewed that and have since then recommended the entire plan, including the original submission and the written response for the AIB's approval. So I'll quickly touch on some of the strengths and areas of opportunity as well we saw from the plan moving forward. So we saw that the plan was really well written and provided a lot of detailed background information on the Curran Commission's intent, and saw that it was very well organized around blueprint tasks and requirements. I think that this is particularly meaningful when you consider that this is a public-facing document. So to ensure that other stakeholders beyond AIB staff and members will be able to access this information, and trying to take the necessary steps for them to understand the plan was really meaningful. So we wanted to highlight that. We also found that the committee conducted a really comprehensive set of stakeholder interviews to gather a variety of perspectives on the opportunities and challenges in developing in conducting the CT committee's work. And that could help to inform future stakeholder engagement opportunities in the future by other state agencies. So we think that this could help to serve as a good model for others moving forward. In terms of the type of public and stakeholder engagement that should be conducted in developing these plans. Many of the sections provided a strong analysis of the Maryland CTE landscape when it came to where we are in terms of apprenticeship opportunities and achievement, credentialing, and we also saw that they highlighted best practices from other states and high-performing countries, and therefore, really incorporated recent research into their report, and that they provided analysis of the work ahead and the challenges, overall that will be in place to achieve their vision for the CTE system in the state. So as I mentioned, we wanted to get some more information about how the CTE committee will lead and coordinate the work of establishing a statewide CTE system. So we asked for a written response to this question. And the CT committee's written response does identify the coordinated tasks that they will be leading state agencies in implementing and accomplishing, and their intent to identify different roles and responsibilities for state agencies that are involved in this work in conducting and accomplishing these tasks. Within that written response, though, and we acknowledge that the response says that this is not a comprehensive list of all of the coordinated tasks, but we did notice that the list of tasks did not include identifying a statewide framework for CTE. And we just really wanted to note this because of the significance of the CTE framework and really what it means for CTE implementation across the state, because we, as part of the framework should identify CTE pathways that are aligned with state workforce needs, prioritize apprenticeships as the preferred industry recognized credential, and really identify what constitutes a rigorous CTE pathway. So it really just means a lot in terms of CTE program implementation across the state. So, knowing that the response did not include this, we will be following up with the CT committee on their progress with the framework's development. But we just wanted to note this in the areas for further growth and improvement section, that even though we did get a lot more information from that written response about how they are envisioning their role in leading the state CTE system, this was a missing element, and we will be following up on this. The written response also described how the CTE committee strategic facilitator, so LEAs, in addition to the CTE committee, could apply for and be matched with a strategic facilitator under the technical assistance grant. Their response just noted that the strategic facilitator will be developing and implementing a project plan to fulfill the tasks of the CTE committee. We really wanted to just note that under, the intent and purpose of the technical assistance grant, the strategic facilitator should be, and the way that this grant was designed is that the strategic facilitator will be supporting CTE committee staff or LEA staff in doing this work, as opposed to doing this work themselves. So that was something we wanted to note in the feedback and have in the feedback form. And again, we'll be following up with CTE committee staff on the development of these work plans, these project plans in 2024, early 2024. We also saw that the original submission really did focus very appropriately on the 45%, on the goal of reaching 45% of students achieving a industry recognized credential across the state. But didn't sufficiently address what it will take to create and support a more high quality, robust CTE system that is based in, or that includes high school level apprenticeships. The written response, though, did provide some more information about what some of those tasks will be. That includes defining what constitutes a high quality or a high school level registered apprenticeship, and collaborating with partners to update the state Perkins CTE plan. Just two more things we wanted to note. The role of higher education was not discussed as much as we would have expected, considering that community colleges, higher education institutions will play a significant role in students being able to achieve the industry recognized credentials that are part of the CTE system. They will need to be able to access degree programs to achieve these credentials. So community colleges will be playing a significant role in the establishment of the new framework and CTE system. Although the written response did include that the CTE committee will be working with community colleges. So we wanted to highlight that. And also, finally, the CTE committee, we felt that more of the plan could have included how they will be centering equity in their work. In our debrief conversation with them, they noted that a lack of access to the necessary data, as well as a lack of a data analyst on staff, really limited their ability to describe this at length. And we recognize the challenges inherent in that. And there also may be opportunities to look at current practices and policies and structures and think about how those could be revised and changed, even outside of looking at it from a data lens of how we can create a more equitable CTE system throughout Maryland. So that was a somewhat quick summary of our findings from the review. So I'll go ahead and turn that back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Emma. Are there any questions? Dr. Kerwin.
Yes,
Yes.
I do.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Mara, did you have your hand up?
She
I
does
did.
have her hand up.
Please go ahead and I'll come later.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. It sounds, just listening and reviewing some of the work, that there's a lot of work to still be done. What is the time frame for having this complete? And I'm especially concerned with the statewide framework that you mentioned.
So I would note that the CTE committee has undergone a change in leadership recently. Both the CTE committee and the Governor's Workforce Development Board, which the CTE committee sits under. So there's been a change in leadership. So between when the plan was submitted and now, And so similar to with the Higher Education Commission, we've really been working to help make sure there's a clear understanding of what the expectations are. And so to that end, actually, they've invited me to come speak to the CTE committee next week. They have a meeting. Skills Standards Advisory Board would actually dig in to the detail, by industry and career field, to really lay out what specific recommendations around either enhancing existing CTE programs and developing additional apprenticeship programs would be in each industry, that they would then recommend those to the CTE committee within the CTE framework. So that board hasn't been appointed yet. And so that's also a really important step that needs to occur. I will say the CTE committee did, I think, appropriately identify their most immediate next steps and priorities, which are the two federal plans that play a big role in workforce development: the Perkins CTE plan and the WIOA Workforce Investment Opportunity Act plan. Both of those federal plans for the use of federal funds are due in the spring. And so making sure that both of those plans are aligned with the blueprint and reflect the goals of the blueprint is really critical, so that those federal funds can be leveraged to support the blueprint.
Okay, I think there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Yes, there is. Dr. Kerwin.
Yes, so I just want to follow up on Member Doss's comment. I too am concerned about the lack of the statewide framework. Now, so do they have to submit a revised or updated plan for next year, right? So
yes,
do they understand
yes.
that would have to be in this updated plan?
If they should, but we will also be sure to make that clear. Yes.
So, I mean, I think that's really important. That there's got to be some time limit on how long this can hang out there without this statewide framework. So my other question is, one of the issues during the work of the commission was that there are lots of CTE programs that talk about careers or provide skills and other skills for careers, and they were of very uneven quality. And the benchmark, the standard here that we thought we were imposing is that if you have a recognized CTE track, it has to either lead to an industry certified credential or to a program at a 2-year school that would complete that certified credential. Is that the way they are thinking about these CTE programs? I mean, are they fixed on the industry certified credential?
They do understand that the blueprint's goal is that every CTE program or pathway lead to an industry recognized credential, which may be an apprenticeship.
You're right.
Just to be clear, that an apprenticeship is considered a recognized credential.
Okay.
And of course, the goal of the blueprint is really, to really focus on growing the apprenticeship opportunities for students.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there are any additional comments on the CTE committee? Okay, thank you. I think we are now prepared to adjourn in the.
We need a motion to approve the
Yeah, I'm sorry.
CTE plan. That's okay. There's a motion in your agenda. but I'm happy to
Please
read
go
it.
ahead.
Would you like me to read it? Okay. The motion is after careful consideration of the recommendations of AIB staff and based on our own independent review of all documents provided by the CTE committee. The motion is for the board to approve the CTE committee's blueprint implementation plan, initial implementation plan.
So the second to the motion?
I'll second it with the assumption that our staff will make clear to them the expectation on the statewide framework that has to be completed
Right.
no later than their updated plan.
Okay. Okay, with that addition, the motion is now before us. Any questions or comments on the motion before the floor? Hearing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is so approved. Thank you. All right, now we are ready to, I believe, adjourn closed session. We're going to conclude today's meeting, the public meeting, at this point in time. Let me again thank our staff, Dr. Tolson, and all of those who participated with us today, the committees who worked on these very tough and challenging issues for us. It's an awful lot of work, an awful lot of time that they put in to get us to this point. So thank you again for your very, very outstanding participation and hard work as we go through this very difficult process. At this point in time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion, if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll have to have a motion to go into closed session.
We do. So for the last agenda item, the board expects to perform an administrative function and receive legal advice from counsel pursuant to sections 3-103 and 3-305B7 of the General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland. The motion is to close this meeting and then subsequently to adjourn from the closed session.
So moved. There's a second to the motion?
Second.
Been moved and properly second that we adjourn into closed session. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. In opposition? Hearing none, we are adjourned. We're going to take 5 minutes and then we're going to go into closed session.
And also the meeting link is in your agenda where it says adjourn to closed session. If you click on that, that will take you to the meeting link.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.